Sorry. Wait, what? Okay, so sorry. I'm like, I need to double check. Oh, it's live. Okay. Wait, what? It's not live on my LinkedIn. Let me just click on go live again. Oh, it's live. Okay, perfect. Hi, Rob. Welcome to Venture with Grace.
Hi, Grace. Thank you for having me.
Sorry, I just had a mini heart attack to just like double click on the button. But anyway, so to start off the show, obviously you're super accomplished, like growth executive. So you were like the seventh employee of Bark, and you were the co-founder and chief growth officer of Row, and now you're the founder of Snagged. .com. So let's start with like what were some core lessons that you took early on in your career, like you've learned early on in your career that you kind of took into starting Snagged?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. My first LinkedIn Live. They say you always remember your first LinkedIn Live. So I'll write about this one down. Yeah, I mean, overarching lessons, that's a good broad question to start with. I think back to just kind of as I was evaluating these different types of opportunities and businesses and where I was going to jump in, and just kind of the risk profile and appetite. Before I was kind of in the startup space, I was in healthcare consulting for many years, helping hospitals scan in all of their paper, which was just as exciting as it sounds. But kind of had this itch to go more on the entrepreneurial side, but had no real hard skills that would allow me to start a business or feel confident I could start something successfully. But over time, I kind of got more comfortable just taking that leap. I had a daily deal website that I stood up and kind of ran, not really knowing what I was doing. But you just start learning by doing. And I've always kind of taken that philosophy in my career where, you might not be an expert in something, but if you have an interest in a certain area and you can get good enough, you can usually get your foot in the door and then actually start the real learning by getting deep. And so that was kind of my initial foray into marketing on the deal side that then led to getting introduced to the Bark folks and joining this crazy world of startups.
I have so many questions there. So like I know one of the campaigns.
Well, we have time for questions. This is perfect.
So in your Bark era, so you figure out like on Instagram, you could post something at like 5:15 a.m. or something for like a dog picture, and then you get a lot of like things to like basically you get a lot of followers that way organically.
Yeah.
Like today, so I mean I don't want to give you like I don't want to like I don't want you to give out all the secret of Snacked, but what would be the equivalent of that today?
Well, Bark and Row versus Snagged are very different types of businesses. So, Bark started as direct-to-consumer treats and toys for dogs. Now they do a bunch of different things, including just launched an airline where you can fly with your dog across 8 different cities. Row, telehealth company, direct-to-patient, connecting folks with medical professionals and helping them with different treatments. Snagged is very much a services or a consulting business where folks will come to me either just getting started, just out of Y Combinator or large public company experienced folks. And they'll say like, hey, I'm trying to figure out how to get these domain names. How do I get started? And so very different in the sense that Snagged is more on the service side. And it's really just kind of me and a small team of freelancers that help out occasionally. But just like with any business, you kind of need to find where your areas of focus are and what you're particularly good at. I think in the earlier my career, I really hung my hat on growth chops, being able to understand how to spend money in a smart way, how to track it efficiently, et cetera. I think at this stage and what I'm doing with Snag, it's much more about understanding the problem at a high level and then kind of just finding a way to get it done and help folks get access to this inventory.
Totally. Okay, so if so this is like another growth question and then we'll jump into Snagged. Another growth.
Yeah, whatever.
I thought some of the things that you mentioned were like really important. When you were talking about the Row experience, you were talking about like analytics. Like so you were running basically two teams. Like one team is like people who are doing, I guess, performance marketing slash like people who are tracking the all the data kind of thing, and then the other part is like the branding side of things. I wonder, so for like a smaller company or like people with like a smaller team or like maybe even like a call it like solo GP VC firm. So since a lot of the listeners are investors, what would you suggest them to like do to grow their business or like grow their brand? So, and also a lot of these like brand related asset sort of things are really hard to track. I feel like it sometimes it's just like a vibe. So how do
Yeah.
you kind of like track or like showcase this to your team that like, hey, like here's like 5 things I've done, here are the results and kind of stuff.
Yeah. A very good, very broad kind of question. I think that, it really depends on the type of company, the stage they're at, the amount of money they can spend on
Mhm.
marketing, their runway, et cetera. But I think broadly, as you're getting started, you really do initially focus on what are the actions and activities I can take on the marketing side that are going to lead to new customers coming in and revenue coming in, et cetera. At Row, we talked a lot about earning the right. Earning the right is a big thing. Like you earn the right to invest more on the brand side. You earn the right to do different things that might enhance the brand that are harder to track, et cetera. But I always find that early on, you can have an organic social presence. You should invest there. It helps you kind of find your voice and work things out on the creative side. But you do want to find something that you can hopefully hang your hat on when it comes to acquisition, whether that's a performance channel, whether that's organic social, whether that's email, something that's more quantifiable. And then you make sure that the creative you're putting out around that is a little bit more brand leading, right? Where
Mhm.
there used to be, I think, much more of a delineation between this is brand and this is performance versus where it is now. It's your performance ad should also have a brand element to it. And
Mhm.
your brand ad shouldn't just be purely for the sake of building the brand. There should be a call to action. There should be some way to understand this is impactful. So I think early on, to recap, I think early on, you certainly want to focus on finding ways that you can have performance driving marketing activities and channels, but making sure that your creative also lends itself to the brand. But as you mature as a company, you earn the right to kind of unlock more harder to attribute spend and things that are more, I would say, brand forward.
I really love that. So basically you start with like performance marketing, maybe drive traffic to your newsletter or something. And like so I also wonder like at what point should the startup evaluating um if the brand have to like lead or like if the marketing should lead to sales. I mean, I know like if at the beginning you can drive a lot of like amazing traffic to sales, that's great. But like sometimes it's also the product's problem. So for
Yeah.
example,
Yeah.
if the product don't work, like is it my fault to like not drive traffic to you
Yeah.
kind of thing? So how do you quickly filter out or like if there's any testing method that you would suggest people to do to um understand what went wrong kind of thing?
Yeah, yeah. No, that's a great question. I think, and this comes up a lot, especially early stage. Something I've seen many times through my career. Like, I think there can be sometimes a misunderstanding of the need for product market fit and how marketing plays into that. Right? Like the best marketing in the world on the most perfect channels is not going to fix something that doesn't have fit. So what you really need to start with is finding those early signs that people want your product. They're willing to pay you for your service, whatever it is. We had examples early on where at Row, the first product we launched was for men's health, erectile dysfunction. Second product we launched was for smoking cessation. It was a product called Zero. And we did not get a ton of traction, and there were some initial ideas from the team of, hey, we need to look at different channels, we need to diversify, we should be thinking more of a funnel, etc. I think what we learned was that was actually the opposite of what we should focus on. People didn't want the product we were offering, so spending more money on TV or podcasts or whatever, that doesn't accelerate the growth that already exists. You're looking to find a little bit of something that is working and then pour gasoline on the fire versus pour gas on it and it'll work. And so I think understanding that early on and being comfortable with doing non-scalable marketing, reaching out to people, DMing people, getting on the phone with people, sending letters, doing in-person things, that's fine because you want to find that core group of people that love your product and you are building for them. And then you use channels and you use paid to really accelerate that. But the mistake early stage folks make sometimes is just like, hey, I need to be on Facebook and Pinterest and running ads on Reddit and Twitter. And it's like, if you're not getting any traction across, I don't know, Meta and Google, that's a decent sign that maybe you should pump the brakes a little bit on the spend, recalibrate the offering or the messaging or the creative or whatever it is, and take another spin. Because very rarely will just expanding your channels gloss over a lack of product market fit.
I have another question on the management side for you. So, like, would you say you have to test every single channel until something works yourself and then hand it out to someone? Or would you try to, I mean, I'm sure like this varies when, Row is like a lot bigger than when it started. So maybe right now you cannot be the perfect expert for everything, but I wonder, would you need to, I guess like be some sort of expert or like run some sort of campaign yourself before hand it off to your team? Or would you say it's
Yeah, I mean, it depends, right? It depends on who's on your team already and what your skill sets are. I was in a unique position coming off of Bark for 5 years where I had spent a lot of money, I had run a lot of channels, and that was part of the reason why Saman and I were a really good fit. We could kind of do all of the things ourselves. So I ran our initial, couple channels to understand where there was traction. And then as we saw that it was working, I brought in people that were much smarter and more accomplished than me in those areas to build them out. But I do think, Grace, you kind of touch on this point that I talked about before, which is I think there is this pressure early on to really diversify your channels and say like, hey, we can't just be throwing money into Meta or Google, right? That's also a common thing you hear from VCs. We can't be paying this tax. I actually disagree with that. I think that is perfectly fine to start when you're early stage. You're just trying to find something. And it doesn't mean that you will only use Meta ads forever. But if you're seeing results there and it's close enough from within where your metrics need to be, don't assume that there are 10 other channels that can work in the same way, because you might come back to it a year later saying, all right, we're ready to scale this up now, and prices have doubled and it's no longer effective. Like, you have to strike while the iron is hot when you have a channel that actually works. That's another thing I think, like, as I said, you earn the right to diversify your channels. You're not going to be a Series C company just running Meta, but God forbid you hit on something with Google search when you're early on. Like, you should ride that as hard as you can and drive as much volume as you can within, the unit economics that makes sense, and not worry as much about needing to diversify right out of the gate. It's more like a luxury problem to have.
Totally. I have a question for you about Snagged. So since right now you're the CEO of this company, how would you like dedicate your time? So since like the product is like a service-based product, why don't we start with like, what is Snagged, and like, how do you help founders? Like, I know that you help like Gary Tan or Alexis Ohanian to snag names, and then Euphoria. The founder was also on our show previously. So why don't we start with like what is Snagged, and then we can dive deeper into.
So Snagged is very simple. We are a digital acquisition agency. We help companies acquire domain names. So it seems very simple, but acquiring a domain name has become much more complicated than folks would envision. Basically, all good domain names are taken. So everything is already registered, and many of those live behind privacy. So if you want to go get grace.com, I haven't looked it up, but if there was no website there and it was behind privacy, you really wouldn't have a great idea how to get in touch. How do I make an offer? How do I even understand if this is something I can acquire? So I get inbound from a lot of different types of customers and clients. People assume that it is small folks, like incubators and people that are just getting started. And I do work with a fair number of people coming out of YC, et cetera. But it's also a lot of very experienced, very senior people that wind up working with Snag. So I work with folks like, John Zimmer, the co-founder of Lyft, and Ben, CEO co-founder of Pinterest in Prague, the CEO of Twitter. And it's because founders really only go through this process of trying to find domain names a couple times as they're building companies. And it's traditionally, like, as I mentioned, pretty opaque, pretty complex. Who do I reach out to? How do I get in contact? How to negotiate? What is the valuation that is fair for these things, et cetera? So really, I'm kind of that bridge between someone who speaks domains and someone who speaks startup. And there are just not a lot of folks that have kind of worn both hats. And so hence Snagged.
Amazing. Okay, so what does the process kind of look like these days to snag a domain name?
Nice. Well done. I get $1 every time someone uses the word. Yeah, it really depends. So there's all sorts of different types of deals. Sometimes I get brought in to help negotiate if something is for sale and they just want more of an expert who knows the space and how to work with folks. A lot of times it's, hey, I'm looking for this specific name, right? I want to get grace.com. I have no idea how to do it. Help me figure out the process. And then other times we kind of work on more of branding and naming exercises where people say, I'm flexible on the name. Here's some ideas, but I want to use the availability of getting, usually whatever.com as an input as I make my decision. Because I don't want to name it like Grace, and then the best that I can get is like trygrace.io because that doesn't jive with how we set up the brand. So it's really across the gamut, and folks will just reach out. Usually it's me. I hop on the phone with them. We talk through what their goals are, what their budget looks like, what the process has been up to this point. And then I'm kind of put on my Sherlock Holmes hat. I don't have it here. It's in the other room. And just kind of go down and the rabbit hole and on the scavenger hunt to see if we can figure out how to get in contact with these folks.
Do you feel like this would be a $1 billion business, and why?
A $1 billion business? I do not. This for me is very much almost like an on accident business. I'll say, like, when I stepped back from Row about 2 years ago, I decided to spend some time just playing in areas that I naturally enjoy. And I realized some of that is sports, some of that is nonprofit work, some of that is domain names. I've always just loved domain names. So I think there's great opportunity here. I think the overall domain market is, a multi-billion-dollar market. But in terms of Snagged, I don't think we're gunning for the IPO just yet. But I think it is a very interesting business that I enjoy, and I kind of didn't even mean to formalize it this much, but the outreach and demand has been pretty staggering to the point where it's made me rethink maybe I should lean into this a little more. It seems like there's opportunity.
I guess, like, how do you would you see this as an agency service, like, or like do you guys charge, like, what lawyer does, like you do a retainer per month, or like it's a one project based kind of services? And
yeah, it can be. Again, it really varies. Like sometimes if it's project based, if it's like we're going to go get this one domain name, very much like single project based. There's other folks I work with that's more on a consultative basis around the brand and thinking about overall assets and branding. Some of it has also led to like, hey, I didn't realize you also know all this about growth. Like, could you help me think through our growth strategy and fundraising strategy and all these different things? So it's more just been like a pretty amazing way to meet a lot of people. And then once we start talking through where they're with the business and what they need, that the engagements themselves can take many different turns.
Got it. I guess, like, since right now you're the CEO of your own company, how much time do you spend on the product itself? And like, do you have to hunt down all the domain yourself, or does your team member do, like, or is there a separated process behind it?
Yeah. Well, one of the really nice things about this type of business and why it is attractive to me at this stage of my career is there's no product. It's really just me doing research. I built a little bit of back end and some workflow, and I've got the website and email and stuff, but it's not a technical product, right? If people say, I want to get this thing, and then you go down the rabbit hole. You take notes from the breadcrumbs you've collected across the internet to try and piece this puzzle together. But there is not really like a digital product in the same way that there might be on like a Row or a Bark or an e-commerce store, etc. So yeah, it's primarily me. I get to work directly with folks. I do a lot of the research myself. Occasionally, I will sub that out to folks that I work with on a contract basis, especially if things are like particularly difficult to figure out, if there's a real mystery. But it's very much a small business where I'm primarily doing everything, and that's part of why I really like it.
Totally. I wonder, so like since you guys also have a newsletter, how do you grow a newsletter in 2024? So I know that in your first like business era, you're doing like the Tuesday happy hour kind of situation. Would you suggest the same strategy to today's age? And then since you're growing snack.com, not like the prior business, like how would you go about building a newsletter in the business space?
So great question. Actually, something that's on my list. I have a bullet that says grow Snagged newsletter. Up to this point, it's been very organic. We get a decent amount of traffic just from referrals, and so I threw a newsletter sign up on there. And so we have a couple thousand people that are just interested in hearing these stories about kind of the early days of the internet, interesting stories about domains. We had one recently about onecharacter.coms. There's only 3 live onecharacter.coms, and why that is, kind of the story behind it. So it's just interesting. Honestly, it's interesting stories about the early days of the internet and how things have evolved. But yeah, I think there's certainly opportunity. I think very different world now than it was in 2010 when it comes to growing newsletters. But I still think that there's incredible power in email. And I think it is a really, really valuable tool for any business, something that can be commonly overlooked. But someone's coming to your website, you should be prompting them for, in some capacity, sign up for a newsletter, follow us on social, reach out and contact us, whatever it is. So I think there's opportunities for probably partnership, maybe some promotion, maybe using some of the cool tools that these like newsletter platforms have in terms of like borrowing and bartering for traffic. But yeah, definitely on the to-do list.
I wonder, so when it comes to like there's like I guess 3 things I could think of. I could like, since like a lot of our audience or like people who come on are like investors, so basically every VC firm has a newsletter these
Yeah.
days. And like how would you stand out if you're like a person who just created a fund or just created a company? And how do you keep people coming back? Because for example, use snack.com as an example. You mentioned about like, these interesting stories of like how like, these like, I don't know, single letter domain name related things, like how they started, that kind of stuff. I think it's really interesting, but like on the other hand, like it may not keep people coming back, because I feel like for people to come back for something, they either will get like people's like incentives are like very selfish these days. Like they want to get like a coupon or something, or like something that can directly add to their daily life right away.
Yeah.
I wonder like how would you kind of like position the newsletter to a certain degree so that like people will find value immediately, and then also like keep coming back to have the mention of like checking multiple times.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's a balance between asking people to do something for you, buy something, click, whatever, and then giving them content that they find valuable. I think, the Snag newsletter in no way, shape, or form is a powerhouse, but we have close to 65% open rates because it's people who want this type of content. And we are never really pushing anything. It's just telling these stories. And so I think being really clear about who your audience is and then what adds value to them is one way to make sure you're really getting engagement there. And like you said, there can be other ways to juice that, right? You can do giveaways, you can do referrals, you can go skim based, etc. We're actually going to start giving away some of the new Snag swag that is in production. So be on the newsletter. But yeah, I think it is that balance of just what do people want and making sure that you're not being overly pushy in terms of frequency and CTAs in your email so that you're just turning people off.
Mm. I wonder, so in terms of like on the social media content strategies, I feel like since I'm like more familiar with the VC space, I saw that like a lot of VC firms started doubling down on their YouTube channel, or some are like making TikTok style videos. Do you think those are too late? And like how would you go about like um when you have like really limited resources
Yeah.
versus like these like bigger companies with like $1 billion funds that can just like spread and
You
pray.
know, I actually, Grace, think about that very similar to what we talked about before. It's identifying your audience, like who's the key core audience that you want to get in front of, and then creating content that resonates with them. I think if you're a VC and your goal is you want to reach everyone,
Mhm.
it's really tough to create content that does that, and really hard to focus on like what do you talk about. You're kind of all over the board versus being a bit more niche, right? Like I worked with a close friend who runs a VC firm in New York, and we worked on their content strategy. But what we whittled it down to was like they wanted to focus on East Coast firms that were going into Series A that were in these three sectors, right? If you can be more specific about that, it allows you to be more personalized in your content so that you're hitting the right folks, right? Hey, if healthcare is your sector, let's make sure that we're putting out content that is helpful for folks that are building in the healthcare space, right? If it's Series A or pre-seed, whatever it is, let's put on happy hours where we're inviting those folks and people can bring friends, because usually if somebody is in that space, they're going to know someone else who's starting something in that space, et cetera. So I really think it is about narrowing the universe and not trying to just create as much content, get as many followers as possible. It's more about creating quality followers that ideally could lead to deal flow and other opportunities down the line.
For sure. I wonder, how do you view like the offline versus online strategies? Because I'm sure, like, I feel like I've seen a lot of people doing really well when they are maybe across the globe just tweeting all day. But on the other hand,
You
like as
tweet
you
the
mentioned,
better the investor you are. That's what they say.
so I wonder when you're evaluating the offline sort of like in-person events, how would you go about like building a brand consistently, like offline and online? And then also, um, are they the same group of people in general? Because I personally subscribe to every newsletter in the world, but I only go to like two things in San Francisco.
Are you on the Snagged newsletter?
I am now, so I
Okay,
use, like,
okay.
my fake email there, but I use my, like, yeah, you would not know it's me, but it's my default.
No, it's interesting. I think they're both really good strategies, and people use them differently. Like, I'll use my friends at First Mark as a good example. They invest in content, and they do, Rick is on CNBC and talking about the market, et cetera. But then they're really thoughtful about putting on certain in-person events as well that might cater to a slightly different strategy. If that's about AI, if it's healthcare, if it's early stage Series A folks. So I think that combination is important. And honestly, I think you also have to have an understanding what your goals are, right? What are your goals in creating content,
Mhm,
publishing content, building social, doing in person? Is it deal flow? Is it reputation? Is it adding people to your newsletter? Like being really clear, or as clear as you can, about why you're
mhm.
doing those things lets you then on the other side of actually executing them say, hey, that was worth it, or hey, we should never do that again because that was a huge waste of time and money. And
Mhm.
so as tight as you can get on why are we doing this and how are we going to measure success, I think the better.
I would say, like, no matter if it's a startup or a VC fund, most people are trying to fundraise at all time. I wonder if the like event goal or like the branding goal, part of it is like obviously you have like two side of the clients. One side is like the founders related things, and then versus the other part is your investor, how
Yeah.
do you navigate that balance to, do you create an event just for the investors of your VC fund or your company, or do you do something that's like a mixer for everybody? How do you kind of like um balance that
You
dance?
mean like from a founder perspective?
Yeah. So you can fund a company or a VC fund or something.
Yeah. Um, I don't know that there's any blueprint on how you do that exactly. I
Mhm.
think, we always, from Row side, kind of treated those pretty separately. Like,
Mhm.
Z was always my co-founder and CEO of Row, Zach, was always in contact with our investors, talking with them, keeping the board up to date outside of board meetings, et cetera. So just folks who were in the know. But that was kind of a separate activity than
Mhm.
getting the community together, or like getting customers or users together. And I think that probably makes sense to keep those distinct, but everyone kind of runs the process their own way, and it depends where you are in fundraising and what your runway looks like and how desperate you are for cash, et cetera. Because all those rules can go out the window when depending on your situation.
I wonder, since like you were like the chief growth officer, I don't know if you oversee revenue as well. Like since like marketing or um I guess like marketing or growth sometimes is like spending money, and you can also see it as an investment to like see the return if like people are signing up and stuff. I guess like since how would you um track the success, and like what should be the like what should be the realistic success that you are looking at? So is that like, for example, like the download numbers, or like should it tie to like a revenue goal for a startup?
Yeah. Well, I kind of had the unique opportunity because I
Mhm.
was leading growth and marketing, but also as a founder of the company, being a steward of
Mhm.
our strategic direction, where we are in terms of burn, revenue, runway, et cetera. But I think even more so these days, it's critical that whoever's leading marketing and is pulling the strings on the spend is in lockstep with finance and with really the senior executive and leadership team. Like, the need and the focus, much more so now, on profitability over growth means that sometimes you have to pull levers quickly. You say, hey, this retention cohort didn't renew at the rate we thought. So our revenue is light. That means our payback periods are high. We need to pull back on some of these campaigns that maybe we thought we were going to do yesterday, but we're not going to do today.
Mhm.
Or you say, hey, things are actually looking really good on this channel. We think you have room to scale. Let's push, and see if we can, hold the customer acquisition cost at a certain level, but increase revenue. So
Mhm.
that can sometimes change on a daily basis. So making sure that marketing, and whether that's finance or FP&A or you know CEO, whatever it might be, are really in lockstep is, I think, more critical than ever.
Mm. How do you pick a good company to join? Obviously, I feel like Bark was very successful, or Row was very successful. Um, what's your like selection process? Especially, I feel like when you were having a lot of success with BarkBox, and like when Row came in, like how do you select that you were gonna
Yeah.
talk to do something else?
Yeah, well, I was a founder of Row, so
Mhm. Mhm.
we kind of created that. Wasn't sure if it was going to be successful, but had a good hunch. I think about when I was kind of starting out on my more initial startup journey. I was rolling off of my daily deal site, and I was evaluating different companies, and I came across Bark. And I think the evaluation criteria used there probably holds. Um, I really enjoyed the founders. Like, one, I really liked working with them. I hate to admit that, and hopefully they're not watching, but I like them as people. Um, and really enjoyed the subject matter. Dogs are pretty good. Using pictures and videos of dogs in marketing kind of feels like cheating. Um, and had some hunch that that model was going to work. You can't validate these things ahead of time, especially when it's really early, but had a hunch that people would spend money on their pets, and this could be a fun way to get a foot in the door. So I think when you're evaluating how and if to start a company or to join a company, it's always going to require a leap of faith. It's never going to feel like this is the perfect moment at perfect time and I'm going to get the perfect role and compensate. It's going to require a leap. But if you have trust in the founders, ideally the founders have some experience that you can feel confident in. Like at Bark, Matt was the CEO, was previously CEO at Meetup. And so I knew he had some experience and knew people in the industry, et cetera. But ideally it's a combination of you enjoy the subject matter, you enjoy the people, and you can see a path forward for success in the business.
I'm having a heart attack. One of the listeners were saying not getting any audio. Is that just me? I'm getting audio. Are you getting audio?
I'm getting audio, yes.
Okay, perfect. Hey guys, can anyone tell us if you're getting audio, please? Thank you. Sorry. I think we should be fine.
Okay.
Yeah, I think
if not, I could act it out. I could act things out more.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, let's act things out, I guess. Oh, also this will be distributed onto every podcast channel too. So I hope everyone's getting audio, please. So I wonder, okay, so like we're just gonna act as he is getting audio, someone's getting audio. Okay, loud and clear. Perfect. Thank you so much, Rob. Appreciate you. And then okay, so getting audio from both. Oh, perfect. Thank you, another LinkedIn user. Okay, great. Thank you so much, guys, for confirming us. Okay, something performative will be great. Okay, awesome. Thank you. We'll just
calm down, Rob. Calm down.
Oh, God. Okay. So yeah, okay. So anyway, so I wonder, oh, audio is fine. Okay, perfect. Thank you guys so much for like letting us know because yeah, I'm having a heart attack. But anyway. Okay. So also audience, if you have any question for Rob, like please like also send them in so we can like address them here. Okay, so I wonder when it comes to like, so if you and I are starting a company, we cannot start the dog company anymore. So like what should we start? How should we pick a subject? If it's like a CPG brand, and how should we go about like doing it, like to like, you know, go to market, like grow the company into $1 billion business?
Are we starting a company together right now? Are we doing it live? Is that what's happening?
Yeah, we're doing it live. Yeah, exactly. That's what we're doing. Brainstorm.
Box of treats and toys for cats seems like the opportunity.
Cats? For cats? What for cats?
No, I think the ideation process is part of the magic, right? You know, Saman, one of my co-founders at Bro, always talks about when you're thinking about ideas for a business, the best way to do it is to think about your personal life, like your own life. Like, what are the problems or challenges that you experience? And then write that down and then see if other people are experiencing those problems too. And so I think that's really great advice because whatever you start, if we're starting our $1 billion CPG company, we should have some sort of personal connection to it. We should have some, you know, some sense of this is a problem that I can fix both in my life and also have this affect a bunch of others. So I really like that advice, and I've tried to keep that in mind when talking to other folks and also just thinking about my own next steps in my own career. But a good place to look.
Okay. So what if so what problem are you having? So I feel like whenever I think about a brand, I always think about like a coffee company because I feel like everyone like coffee, but it's just like a really big red market, like a red ocean market. So like how would you think about like the competition side of things?
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes back to what we talked about before is finding more of a niche within a larger market, right? Like it is hard to be perfect for everyone, for everything. Like let's take your coffee example. I think it's almost a fool's errand to say, let's take on Starbucks. We're just going to create a different type of coffee company that's better and it's faster and it's cheaper, whatever. Versus saying like, there's a subset of consumer that really loves, making this up, we're just spitballing here, but really loves cappuccinos. And we're just going to focus on making all these different types and flavors of cappuccinos. We're going to market to cappuccino people. We're going to call ourselves cappuccino.ai. And, you know, we're going to have machine learning. But lets you really focus all of your energy on that specific demo and build your products around that specific demo too. And then you earn the right, callback, to expand into other areas of coffee as you get a base. But if you try to focus right out of the gate on being everything to everyone, you're going to kind of create like an okay product for everyone versus I'm going to create something that is perfect for this subset of people, and they are going to love it, and they're going to tell other people that also will love it. And then from there, you have your base, and you can kind of grow off of that. So I'm a big fan of starting with slightly more niche areas. And, the same thing could be said about how we started Row, right? We didn't start as we're this digital hospital where we can do dermatology and weight management and sexual health and fertility, et cetera. It started with one very specific condition where we brought people in, we built trust, we built credibility and momentum, and then allowed people to see there's opportunity to expand into other areas.
Totally. Let's say if we're starting cappuccino, you mentioned cappuccino.ai. Does that have to catch a trend like an AI or crypto or something?
Does what, sorry?
Does it have to catch a trend like a AI, crypto, clean beauty? Like, I don't know, like what coffee?
I mean,
a trend?
Certainly not. I do think it is. I do think there's plenty of room for non-trendy businesses, boring businesses, things that are not AI and crypto and whatnot. But I think a lot of times folks will gravitate towards where the money is being invested. If you look at VC right now, there's a lot of money being invested in AI. So I think that's why you see the batches coming out of YC and startups that are getting going. Like a lot of it is AI based because there's money to be invested there. So I don't know if we're taking investment for the Grace and Rob Coffee Company, but that's the type of thing where I don't think you need to tap into any sort of zeitgeist there. You just build something awesome and you work on, put your head down and work on getting to the hands of the right people.
How would you like do the innovation part about your product, or does your product have to have some sort of innovation as a call it like a more CPG related brands?
It's a good question. I'm not sure that I know the answer to that. I think if you're creating something that is net new and it adds value, I think that can be innovative in and of itself. Like, for example, I think back to when we launched with Row and we were doing, just erectile dysfunction for men's health. We didn't need like a brand new, buzzy, innovative campaign or like all these new interesting talking points. It was just innovative that you could now talk to a doctor online and if it was safe and appropriate, get something shipped to your door. So like the core offering was innovative. If you're just doing like, let's say, I don't know, if we're just rolling out a new coffee company, there needs to be something that's different, whether that's innovation on the product, whether it's being niche with the market, whether it's something really innovative from a branding side, like what a Liquid Death has done with water. There probably needs to be something different to stand out. Otherwise, you're kind of just one of many, and it makes it hard for people to select you.
I wonder when it comes to picking the growth channel. So, I wonder how would you pick where to go after? So I think like Gary Tan mentioned about this in his interview with you on the show about like, BP, the basically people are buying buzz ads to like promote something. And then I know that like when you first joined like Bark, you did a lot of like I guess like digital ads buying. So I wonder what would be your like marketing strategy today for building a coffee company? Would it be like going viral on TikTok, or would it be like, running buzz ads or something?
Well, first of all, as soon as we hang up, I'm going to get the domain for a coffee company because I don't want
Okay.
to snag that before we do.
Perfect.
No, it's interesting. I mean, again, I think it starts with just like what is the newness that we're bringing to the market, right? If it's cappuccino based, right? Do you go out and you kind of plant a few seeds with influencer or with organic TikTok, or you do a little bit of paid search or some paid meta? Like, I think it's fine early on to do a little bit of exploration, and then you just see where there are signs of life, right? That's where it's like, oh, we did this TikTok video. We did 10 TikTok videos. One of them blew up and we sold like 100 subscriptions to like or cappuccino thing. Like, that's interesting. We should investigate that more. You're really just looking for something. It may not work perfectly in terms of like your customer acquisition costs, but something that shows you there's traction to be had. And that's when you say, all right, we're going to let's get rid of all the other stuff we're doing. We're just going to focus on this. Let's see if we can crank out more organic videos and see if we can replicate that. Or we saw enough traction on paid search that we actually want to put all of our budget to that and see if we can scale at those metrics or get more efficient, et cetera. Where you say Meta's kind of working, we need to double the conversion rate. Let's just spend time on landing page optimization and upsells and incentives to get people to convert, et cetera. So it's really just finding that one initial, sign of life that you can then turn more time, attention, and money to try and tease it out. And then again, as I said before, that's where I'm a big fan of. Once you start to hit on that, push as hard as you can. Don't then go back to, great, now let's open up, Reddit ads and let's open up Twitter ads. That's something I did early in my career at Bark. We were very early to Facebook. I was sitting at my desk the day that Facebook newsfeed ads launched. We started running those, and I was like, this is going pretty well. And we're getting customers for like $2. So I ran that myself for a few months, but then I passed it off and I kind of went on this search for the next golden channel. And in retrospect, realized I should have just spent all of my time and money cranking on that channel, because prices go up and competition increases, and you never have the same level of opportunity you do when things are working. So I think all that mixed together is my long-winded way of saying, you look for something that works, and then once you find it, you really go deep.
So let's talk about the journey of finding that. So I feel like you mentioned about test maybe 2 or 3 channel per season or something, like per quarter. And then basically dedicate enough time and resources into it. So if it works. And if it doesn't, you don't really regret, you move on to the next thing. What's a good cadence to test things out? And then how much money should you spend when you have no money, if you're a very early stage startup?
Yeah. Well, again, very dependent on stage and budgets, right? I think early on, again, my advice is always to plant a few of those seeds, see what works or what looks like it's going to work, and then invest there. But then as you grow and you look to diversify and try different channel tests, kind of separate things into 2 buckets, right? You have your core channels, right? Like, hey, organic search, investment in content, SEM on Google, and paid meta ads. This is all kind of core. It's like the engine. We're constantly trying to optimize it, trying to increase volume while decreasing costs. But those are things that are kind of proven. And then you have your test bucket, which is all the stuff that we want to try. Hey, we should do Pinterest ads, or hey, what about TikTok shops? Or, what about an in-person event? And you prioritize those usually based on your confidence that you think it could work, how much is required from a third party in order to get it up and running. Does it require, if it's TV, we need to shoot a spot, we need videographers, we need to get editing, et cetera. The lift is a lot larger than, can we use some of our meta assets on Pinterest, right? And then you also look at just budget overall, right? TV being a great example, the ante is much larger to run a remnant cable campaign where you should be bringing 6 figures to the table than it is to maybe experiment with, I don't know, if people want to run Spotify ads. So it's kind of that mix, and then you put it together, you prioritize it based on confidence, spend, and potential volume, and then you start doing it. And ideally, you're not stretching the team so thin where you're running 5 new tests a quarter across different channels, because the key in those cases is not just hey, does this work? Can we spend more money? The key is understanding if it really doesn't work, in my opinion. Is it something where it's this is a dud, we should completely cut this and move on? If you're spreading, let's say you have a $50K of test budget, if you're spreading that across 5 different channels, you don't necessarily get a clean read on, did this really work? Did this not work? Should we do it again? You want to finish that test cycle and have a sense of it's a go or a no-go. And so people make that mistake of trying too many channels at once and spending not enough money on its channel to actually pay for the education they need to figure out what the path forward is. So that's why my preference is always high conviction channels, a smaller number of those where you can truly give it the old college try. And if it shows signs of life, amazing. Let's move it into more of the core bucket and optimize it. And if it doesn't, well, that's something we'll revisit in 2 years and see if things have changed.
Totally. How do you find the more like overlooked area for growth? And then like what does like a chief growth officer's job kind of look like? I know that we emphasize on marketing a lot, but like, as a co-founder and chief growth officer, can you discuss like back in time what were like kind of your day-to-day look like? And beside the marketing component, what goes into growth?
Yeah. I mean, I'll again caveat that it's different in every company, right? For us, growth was really a combination of brand, performance, communications, et cetera, and how we grew overall as a company, both from a narrative and a revenue perspective. But in many cases, it can be a combination of those areas, can involve things like new product growth and product expansion. I think that's a commonly overlooked area when it comes to growth is there's channel work you can do, there's marketing and messaging work you can do, creative of course, but in many cases, true growth will come from adding new products and services that your customer base, existing or potential, is interested in. And so working with, if that's a digital product team, if it's a physical product team, to find ways to spur more growth from a new product perspective as well. So yeah, I think a wide range of different capabilities. I think Chief Growth Officer is a relatively new type of title. I think that kind of has bifurcated from CMO, where CMO used to just be like everything that's related to marketing. And then there was this push of, well, brand and performance are so different that they actually need different people that are thinking about that. And I think it is a constantly evolving process where people are figuring out like, is marketing inclusive of performance? Is performance inclusive of marketing? Are they separate entities? Should it be complementary? The way we handled it was, being the chief growth officer, I had both of those functions report up into me, and then could kind of help oversee and kind of push for the overlap on those two.
I wonder, so if today like a company come to you, an AI company come to you to be like, hey Rob, I want you to join our founding team and essentially help us grow our company into like $1 billion company. What would be your thought process on evaluate if this is like a sounding business to join as a co-founder or like as a core team member? And then B, like what would be the metrics that you're delivering to the person? So like people would be like, okay, so look at these like 5 top AI company, and let's call it, I don't know, like Devin AI or like OpenAI or whatever. So like you're like companies that are making really big splash on the news, and then a startup trying to go after one of these like very big competitors, and then they're like, hey, just do whatever they do. What would you say to the founder? And then what would be like a realistic benchmark that you set for the company to grow into some sort of size?
Yeah, I mean, I think if we get approached by Cappuccino.ai after this, we'll have similar conversation. I mean, look, I think anytime you're evaluating joining a company, I think you need to go back to what you think the growth potential looks like, both for you professionally and the company as well. I think there's so much happening in AI right now. It's kind of hard to figure out who's going to be the winners, who's going to be the followers. Like, there's so many companies that were kind of forced to pivot very quickly when OpenAI announced a lot of their new features and functions. A lot of companies have been financed through VC that have to figure out what to do next. So I think there's tremendous opportunity in this space. I invest a little bit with my growth syndicate through 2020 Growth and Harry Stebbings, and we'll look at different AI opportunities. I think the deals that we're most bullish on, I think, are ones that are kind of taking away more menial manual tasks that people are doing right now and help automate those through AI. But I think there will certainly be winners in this space, but just like with crypto and other hot markets that have popped up, there'll be a lot that will also fall by the wayside or need to figure out pivots as well. So the outcome there remains to be seen.
What would be like your mental checklist to, so basically it's hard to pick a winner, right? So if you decided to dedicate your time to join something, like what would be, like, call it like the conversation set with like the company? So I know that like you like joint role as a co-founder, like what was like the early days look like? You mentioned about like having the same value, similar vision for the company, all that kind of things. How do you evaluate if you have that with the co-founding team if you don't know them for like 45 years? And how do you,
that would be a lot of years to
yeah,
know.
exactly, yeah.
All I can do is kind of give you my experience and see if that resonates with folks. And I've talked about this before, but when I was at Bark, that's where I met Z and Saman, and they were kind of poking around, looking at different projects. Very unique guys. Saman has like a product and design brain. Z has like an investor and legal and healthcare brain. And I was more focused on the marketing side. And I think that's where we found, hey, we have good complementary skills. There's something interesting here where we can do a lot of the things ourselves. But yeah, we didn't know each other all that well. I'd known Saman in the past, but didn't really know his story or what his situation was, and same with Z. But what we did early on was one of the first things we did before we even got into the nuts and bolts of what we were going to build was we just spent some time together. We went to Z's apartment in the city, and we spent 2 days kind of just like telling our life story. And I learned a lot about those guys and their families and things they've been through. And just understanding people's context can be really valuable because your relationships will be strained. Things will come up. Challenges will happen, and being able to have a foundation that you've built where you've said like, okay, I know who this person is. I've spent time with their family. I understand and respect them, even if I strongly disagree with this decision or this thing we're talking about. Builds just a stronger overall scaffolding for your business overall. I know if you're not starting at a founder level, you don't always get those opportunities to go super deep and be in a basement for 2 days with co-founders telling your life story. But I do think there's opportunities to learn about those founders, to look at their history. Maybe you can speak with some folks who they've worked with in the past. Do people want to work with them again? What was their experience, et cetera? And you kind of gather as much information as you can to make as informed decision as you can.
I wonder, so when it comes to, okay, so I want to be mindful of time. I want to keep it like maybe one real question and then 1 minute fire round if you have time.
Sure.
Okay. So one last question about like, for growing, if you're first joining a company, like, and then you're the chief growth officer, what would be like 3 things that you do at that company?
I'll try to generalize it. But I think the first thing you need to do is just observe and try to understand what has happened in the past from both a brand and marketing side. What have we done? What has worked? What has not worked? I think the second thing you do is you use the opportunity to be a fresh set of eyes to bring other thoughts and potential opportunities to the table. And you ask questions and you say, have we considered doing this before? Have we tried doing that before, et cetera? And then I think you kind of give yourself, 60 days, 90 days to come back with a more fully formed plan around, hey, I understand the goals of the business. I've spent time with the CEO. I understand where we want to go, where we want to take the company, and what our actual metrics need to look like. I also understand the context around what we've done and things that we have tried or not tried and why. Here is my plan for what I would like to see happen. And then start to also get to know the team in parallel and understand, are these folks that are going to become your folks versus inherited people? because as soon as you're in that job and you are now responsible for the growth of the company, it doesn't matter when they were hired or, what their position was when they started. That's your team and that's your headcount. So you need to be accountable for it. So I think information gathering, listening, alignment with executive team, and then presenting your strategy for the point forward is probably that 90-day plan.
Totally. Okay, so we're at the last.
Matt Meeker from Bark.
Who would you invite to your dinner party?
Who would I what, sorry?
Who would you invite to your dinner party?
Barack Obama.
Where can we find you outside of work?
At home with my kids.
Amazing. Well, Rob, thank you so much for coming on the show today. It was a fun conversation.
This was great, Grace. I'm going to go get our coffee startup rolling right now. I'll email you after.
Please, let's snag the domain first.
Nice, snagged.com.
Okay. Thank you so much, Ken, Shia, Rob, and many LinkedIn users for joining the show. Okay, let me quickly end stream.